Hello, welcome to tonight's leadership conversation. We are going to be looking again at leadership effectiveness at the enterprise level, but tonight we'll be concentrating more on the public sector institutions, how to achieve effectiveness and leadership effectiveness in public sector organizations. So those who are arriving, welcome here. Those who are coming for the first time, you're very welcome to our presentation. If you are a returning person, then welcome. Bring your friends along. You know the tradition. Announce your presence, bring your friends along, do a watch party. I believe it's going to be a very interesting discussion tonight. I want to look at the public sector institutions that we have. The public sector institutions are the engine for driving the entire country. Yes, it is believed, it has always been said that the private sector is the engine for growth. However, the private sector depends on and relies on the public sector to be able to do whatever at all they have to do. And so if we are going to achieve effective public sector, private sector, if we are going to achieve effective private sector in any economy, in any country, then the public sector efficiency can never be taken for granted. And the problem of inefficiency, the problem of low productivity and corruption, etc., that we have in many countries, many developing countries, particularly in Africa, can be traced to very inefficient public sector, very corrupt public sector, very unproductive public sector. And so I believe that when the public sector is fixed properly, then everything else will come in place. Everything else will take its place. So tonight we are looking at what I believe is a very interesting topic about the public sector efficiency. Remember, we've been looking at leadership efficiency at the enterprise level, and when I engaged with you 3 days ago, we established the fact that the country, or any economy, is made up of all the productive units or entities that are in the country, and these are subdivided into private sector institutions and then public sector institutions. Now, we went ahead to look at how organizations operate, the various entities of leadership in an organization, starting with the board. We looked at the functions of the board. We look at the what we call the visionary function of the board. We look at what you call the entrepreneurial or the enterprise function of the board. We went ahead to look at the oversight function of the board, and we looked at how the board relates to senior management or top executive management in order to run the organization. We looked at the functions that the senior management have to play in order to become effective in the organization and to be able to deliver the results and to achieve the goals of the organization's leaders. That's where we ended. But then we also looked at management efficiency within the organization. We look at how management practice produces certain employee mindsets, which in turn give rise to certain employee behaviors, and then which ultimately result in the organization's outcomes, whether it's going to produce at a top level, whether it's going to be successful, whether it is going to be profitable, whether it's going to raise productivity, or it's going to be the otherwise. All depends on management style. Okay, so that's where we ended. Now, to begin today's discussion, I want to say that the public sector we are talking about is not far-fetched. We all know it, but basically it involves the ministries, it involves the departments that represent the ministries or that work under the ministries, and then these departments, some also have agencies that work for them. So we're talking about the MDAs, the ministries, the departments, and the agencies. Then, of course, we are looking, all of them combined, we're also looking at the civil service. So the public sector and the civil service all combined. That's what we are looking at tonight. Now, if you look at these institutions, you realize that they are government institutions. They are owned by the state, and some are called the state-owned. Yes, some are called state. These institutions also include what we call the state-owned enterprises. Okay, the state-owned enterprises. Okay, so that's the totality of what we are looking at. Now, you realize that these are public institutions funded by public money. They depend on the states, for their funding, for their function, etc., etc. They are established by government in order to provide services to the state. So anybody working there, it's not supposed, that person is not supposed to see himself or herself as a privileged person, but someone who has been placed there because the states, the individuals, the citizens, they need certain services, certain quality or level of quality service, which is why the employment of the workers has become necessary. Okay, that's what has to be understood. Now, but as we all know, these public institutions, most of them are very inefficient. They are managed in very inefficient ways. The resources are not properly managed. The people are not properly managed. Processes are not properly managed. Systems are not properly managed. Operations are poorly managed. So there is a gross inefficiency, ineffective management in these organizations. And this is an irony, because compared to private sector organizations, the state makes a huge, comparatively huge investment in these public sector organizations, and most of them are much more resourced than private sector organizations. For example, if you look at the public schools, you realize that the public schools they tend to be more resourced. They have more qualified teachers, more qualified managers, more trained professional teachers that take higher salaries than private institutions, most private institutions. But you compare the outcome or the performance of these schools, and you realize that the private schools are way ahead of the public schools in generic terms. So why is that? What is responsible for this? And then you look at the government institutions, most of them are very well resourced. They have the most qualified human resource. A number of them have got first degree holders, master's degree holders. There are big qualifications, doctorates and professional qualifications all over. So the people are qualified. They are qualified. They've got the knowledge, they've got the skills, they've got the experience, etc. But why is it that quality level is still very low, is below expectation? Why is it so? Why is it so? And particularly, what service areas are we talking about? These MDAs, civil service, etc. What service areas are we talking about? We're talking about service areas like electricity, like water, like education, like health, like roads and highways, like registrars of companies where people want to get their companies registered, tax authorities where people have to file their tax reports or tax returns and so on and so forth. And we all know that it is extremely difficult to have access to the services that these people provide, and that often it's so difficult to receive very seamless service or seamless service without paying your way through, without going to bribe someone, without going to beg someone, without going to persuade someone to do something for you. So normally when you apply for any of these services, the question is, okay, who do you know there? Do you know someone there? Do you know anybody there? So you need to know someone who also knows someone who also sees someone, talk to someone, on your behalf. You need to pay some money and so on and so forth. Very rigid procedures that are so lengthy that people always have to pay their way in order to have access to quality level of service. So that's an irony, because on the one hand, we have very qualified people, we have well-resourced organizations. They use the huge vans, huge vehicles, public vehicles, the V8s, okay, the four-wheel drives. They rove about in these vehicles, and when they are coming, sometimes we give way to them. They are all coming. They're coming. Government officials, ministers, DCs, etc. They are coming, and police escort. Everybody gives way. Now, is it that they are more important than us? No, we do so because they play very critical role. So if we give them all of that, but we don't get what we are looking for, then where is the fairness? See, so today we're talking about the public institutions. So these are the service areas that we are talking about. So service areas that we are talking about. Like we said, they are the most resourced. So they have all of them. Vehicles for most public institutions are plenty. And sometimes they are going on retirement. They sell some of the vehicles to them. So we know. We know. So if we do all of this, if the state invests all of this into them, then we are expecting better level of quality service. And some of them, you look at their retirement package, and it's very attractive. It's good. So we are not saying don't take good retirement package. We are saying with all that you are entitled to, we need to receive an excellent level of service. When I apply for electricity, power, connection to electricity, when I apply for water, when I apply for anything, I go to the hospital, I expect to see very excellent level of quality. But that's not the case. That's the reason we are talking about this evening. Now, so we are asking, why are they that inefficient? Why are they that inefficient? Management of resources is poor. Management of human beings is poor. And like I said, they have the most resource they are the most resource organizations, and they have some of the most qualified individuals. But if you go to the bottom of it, human resource management is generally poor in a number of these organizations. And often because they are not paying the salaries. You see, they don't work, they don't create the money to pay salaries of these people. They can hire the most expensive person and just dump them. Sometimes a small thing happens, and top management forms their opinion about you, that you are not the right person, and then they just dump you somewhere, and then they go and get someone else. Sometimes these organizations, though, they will employ at a time when you're asking, do you really need to be employing? They will, but with all of that, they do very little with the skillful human resource base that they have. So they tend to underutilize the capacities that they have. And a number of the organizations, I sincerely believe that they are well overemployed. In other words, the human resource capacity, the number of people that are working, if you take the ministry department and the agencies, sometimes you could work with just 50% of these people if they are properly made use of. But there is just bad management of human resources, bad management of other resources. That's why we have the kind or the level of service or quality of service that we have for these institutions. That's one point to note. Now, their appointment to these institutions, recruitment to these institutions tend to be very, very political. So sometimes I say they are just like family business. So if this is a public institution, then you realize that the workers there and the ministers there and the politicians who control them, etc., you look at the recruitment that goes on and you're asking, is it a family business? Because the politicians, families, the MDs, family, and the key workers, families, etc., the parliamentarians, family, the ministers, etc., all these family people. And so you realize that if it's difficult to get the right people in there. Now, because the political interference is so huge. And sometimes the people who manage these institutions are frustrated because the politicians won't take their hands off. They won't take their hands off the work. So they just do what they want. And it can be very frustrating. So this is what is happening. And this is not just related or is not restricted only to African institutions. It's a development or developing country syndrome. It's a problem that developing countries around the world face. Even sometimes some of the developed countries do face similar problems and so on and so forth. Okay, now we also realized 3 days ago when we were talking about enterprise or enterprises, I think I tried to explain that there is what you call a historical context to the public sector, and let me refresh your memory again. I did mention that I was trying one of my research that I conducted when I was doing my doctorate. I wanted to understand, and of course my doctorate was on public sector management. I wanted to understand the reason for the inefficiency in the public sector. I wanted to understand the reason for the bribery and corruption in the public sector. I wanted to understand why people don't feel committed to the public sector. I wanted to understand why people feel very low levels of patriotism towards their country, and when they get employed, they are just full of entitlement mentality rather than a commitment to solving problems. When they find a job, they want to make sure that they make money out of that job, and due money that they are not entitled to, they make the money, etc. Wanted to understand why. And so my research revealed that this phenomenon actually evolved from the colonial regime, evolved from the colonial era. And I say, how did that happen? He said, well, the colonial regime, the colonial administration was a foreign institution, and people thought that they didn't have the legitimate support of the people. They were not qualified. They didn't deserve the commitment and loyalty of the local people. So if you are local people, you wanted to show that you were a true African, you were truly patriotic, you were truly nationalistic, then of course you want to make sure that you cheat the system, which is a foreign institution. So you cheat the system, you steal some money from there, or and then you go back and feed the local people. Then you were looked upon as a hero. That's how it evolved. So people were not committed to government. They were not committed to government. And mind you, in those days, much of the formal sector was government sector. And so people working in government sector, they were not committed. And you hear people say, this is government work. In Ghana, we say, this is Aban Juma. It means government work. It's not your father's work. So don't get committed to it. So people do it haphazardly. But on the other hand, they want to get the best out of it. They want to make money out of it, and then they use their positions as a way of making money. So something that you are supposed to do and get paid for, service you are supposed to deliver and get paid for, people have to pay their ways into your pocket to be able to get the work done, to be able to get the service out there. So there's a historical context. One other reason why there's inefficiencies is the mindset that government work in government work, you don't need to make profit. This is a government work. This is a public sector work. So it's not private sector work. So you don't need to make profit. Just keep the institution going. Keep the institution going. Just keep the business as usual, and then keep your job, and then bring as many family people as you can, and just make sure that once you get in there, make sure you bring many more people in there, and make money. And get as much as you can before you get out. This is what is killing developing countries. This is what is killing many countries around the world. Many countries around the world. Now, and surprisingly, even some developed countries have suffered. As I speak, during my study, I realized that even developed countries like Australia, developed countries like New Zealand, developed countries like the UK, at the point they were brought to their knee because the public sector was grounded almost to a halt. The unions were plenty, employees were plenty, productivity level was very low, and in those countries too, there is what you call the welfare state that obliges the government to pay money to people who are unemployed or who are in some situations or circumstances, so provide social services to them. So on the one hand, government is ladled or is saddled with a huge number of employees, unproductively huge number of employees, and a very low level of productivity. On the other hand, there are people who are in the house not working, claiming unemployment benefits, etc. So governments around the world, they realized that the public sector had to be reorganized in a way that will make them more effective, more productive. And so around the early 1980s, there was a movement or a philosophy in managing public sector organizations. This philosophy of managing public sector organization is what you call the new public management. New public management. Now, in new public management says that, well, it is not necessary. It is true that government does not have to make profit, or public sector institutions do not have to make profit, but they don't have to make a loss either. They should not become a burden to the state either, and they have to at least be able to break even and to be able to take care of their own expenditure, to be able to meet their own expenditure. Then they don't become a burden on government. And then how do you do this? First and foremost, you have to make sure that you apply professional management as it is in the private sector. Bring the same way of management, the same philosophy and style of management to the public sector. How do you do this? Now, you need to give more power to the managers in the public sector. Let politicians take away a little bit of their hands and allow the managers to do the work. But you don't just take off your hands. What you need to do is to give them what you call performance contracts. Performance contract. So you give them performance contracts. Say, I'm going to give you a lot of power. I'm going to devolve a lot of power to you. I'm going to take off my hand a little bit so that you can become more autonomous in making decisions. But don't forget, we are not leaving you to yourself. We are increasing your accountability. So you have to account to us, come back to us to account for everything that goes on there. If it doesn't go well, if you need to go to prison, you go to prison. And we give you what you call performance contracts. So we're going to pay you based on performance. If you do well, if your organization does well, we pay you better. So if you save more money, we pay you better. If productivity level rises, we pay you better. If you make better use of human resources, we pay you better. If you don't need to employ too many people and you can employ a few people and deliver the level of service that we are looking for, we pay you better. And then you also hold all the managers under you accountable, and you sign performance contract with all of them. So everybody owns the job. So the more cost people, managers save, the more money they get, the more pay they get. So there's nothing like flat salaries where, because, okay, someone is a manager, someone is a chief, a director, someone is assistant director. So because I am an officer in, in the public sector, these roles are there, these grades are there: officer, manager, assistant manager, deputy manager, assistant. Some people have assistant, deputy manager, whatever at all, and because we are both on the same grade, and we joined the institution the same year, doing the same job, does not mean that we have to take the same salary, and that performance will determine salary. And that people who save more money, they get paid more. People who contribute more, they get paid more. That way, they bring in some kind of private sector philosophy of management. And it has worked in a number of organizations. And then also private sector practices like what we call competition. Bring some form of competition. Bring some form of competition in the private sector, so that they don't just see themselves as just monopolies, but that they can know that there is competition. For example, if in the distribution of power, there are different distributors of power, and then those distributors of power or institutions that are distributing power, they are distributing power. Now their profit level is going to depend on their level of inefficiency and the quality of their service, and so on and so forth. Can you imagine if you apply for electricity, if you apply to be connected to electricity, and right now the main utility that is responsible for electricity, right now when you apply, it's probably 1 month or 2 months before they can connect you. But can you imagine if you have 3, 4, 5 institutions that are in charge of this, and one institution said electricity, connected to electricity in 3 days? I remember some time ago, the defunct UT Bank came and said, loan in 48 hours. Before then, a number of banks, when you applied for loan, it took weeks, sometimes months. But UT just disorganized the whole market. And everybody, all banks had to sit up and to match up with that challenge. See, so when there is that sort of competition in the public sector, it brings some level of efficiency. Of course, competition does not always bring efficiency, but generally it does if it's managed well, if it's handled well. See, and that is about new public management. It involves several other things. It involves something we call corporatization, so where we restructure the organization, the public sector organizations, so that they become more autonomous. They can do so many things. They can take a number of decisions, and they can reorganize to become more efficient. So anyway, if it happens that way, then we can see more or higher level of efficiency. But it takes leadership. It takes leadership, bold, confident leadership to get this done. It takes bold, confident leadership to say, well, government is paying salaries. We are not creating the salary. We are not creating the salary that we use for paying our employees, but we still have to be, we have to be efficient. We have to be cost efficient. We have to be cost effective. So we become very responsible when we are spending. That is leadership in the public sector, that we own the work, and then the corruption goes down, and then we begin, public sector institutions or workers, they cease to see their positions as privileges that they have to take full advantage of and make as much money as they can, and bringing as many, family people and friends, etc., politicians, children, etc., as they can. But they make the place very efficient and very how do we call it, merit based, so that people who are qualified, they go in and do the job over there. So that leadership would have to happen. That leadership will have to happen at the public sector, in public sector organizations, so that we can see more efficient organizations. We can see ministries that are efficient. We can see departments that are efficient. We can see agencies that are efficient. We can receive better level of service delivery. I believe that it can happen. It does happen in other. It has happened in other countries, and I went to a place like Dubai, and I was told, I was speaking with people, and I am told that the government sector is the most efficient, and I saw it. And the government employees are the highest paid. They get paid higher than the private sector, and the government institutions are very efficient. So there are ways that companies are, or that countries have dealt with the issue of the public sector. And so it can be done by leaders who are bold, who are willing to rock the boat, who are willing to confront their own political cronies and party cronies, party members who have filled these organizations with their own members, and then begin to say, okay, we want to outsource all recruitment to public sector institutions, public sector organizations. Recruitment, we want to outsource them. Get an international recruitment firm and say, we want you to recruit to these institutions so that we get the best. And then we get the best. And what also happens in many of these public sector institutions is that because some people come, they are related to some ministers, to some, big people up there. You can't touch them. When they misbehave, you can't touch them. You can't touch them because they are connected there. So it will take leadership in order to bring efficiency into the public sector. Africa is rich, and our public sectors are not poor. Public sector organizations are not poor. What they are poor in is poor management. So if the management systems improve, there's no reason why we shouldn't receive the level of service quality that we anticipate. Well, if you lead in the public sector, if you're a minister, if you're an MD, if you're a parliamentarian, if you're a decision maker in the public sector organization, if you're a manager in the public sector organization, a deputy MD, or you are in top management public sector organization, you are in a board or board chairman in a public sector organization, I want you to reflect on these issues. Public sector organizations can become very efficient if we take off our hands and allow the managers to manage very well. If we train the managers to think like private sector people, if we hold the managers accountable, and if we motivate them to do the work well, they will do the work well. And we can change the mindset of all the workers and to think like private sector people, and to know that there is no spending until we have created. If people get held responsible for the things that they spend, the money that they spend, I believe that we will change what happens in the public sector or in public sector organizations. So, well, thank you for coming back again, and I believe that we are learning some things. I believe that we would send the message across. I believe that we'll share these lessons. I believe that we will forward to those who need to know. If you know some minister that needs to hear this or watch this video, forward the video to him or her. If you know a government official that needs to hear this, if you know someone in the cabinet, someone in among the executive, someone who in parliament, in the judiciary, etc., in the president's office, anywhere that you think they need to hear this message, please forward it and let the message go. Our country can become better. We can receive excellent level of public service delivery. We can receive it. You can receive whatever at all service you apply for in a matter of hours, in a matter of days. Your driving license can come to you in a matter of days. You know your passport. You don't need to go and keep. Of course, we have seen some improvement, but we can still see higher levels of improvement. So thank you so much for coming back, and please, your comments are as always, they are always valued. So feel free and let me have your comments, and share this and organize watch parties with this and let the message go. Thank you so much. Hopefully, and God willing, I'll come again your way on Sunday at 5:30 p.m. God bless you. Remember, when you learn, you change. When you change, you stop some things or start some things anew or strengthen what you have been doing. So look at habits and practices at whatever level you operate in the public sector. Look at practices and habits that will not help you. Get rid of them. Look at those that will help you. Build them up. Those good ones you have been practicing, strengthen them, build up on them, so you can become a better leader, better manager at whatever level you operate. Thank you so much, and God bless you. Bye for now.